Welcome to Enlightened Wealth Strategies, the podcast where insight and knowledge meet opportunity. Please join us as we navigate the world of finance, discovering actionable strategies to help you achieve your personal financial goals.
With decades of combined experience, we're here to shed light on the topics that matter most to your financial well-being. Whether you're accumulating, preserving, or distributing your wealth, this is the place for you.
Now let's dive in and start your journey to financial enlightenment.
And we're live.
Oh, I'm always live. How are you, Jim?
Hello, James.
So we're sitting side by side today,
Yes, we are.
sadly.
That's because we have guests live in the studio.
I know.
Why don't you introduce them?
Okay, I will do that. So with us, I think we'll save the best for last.
There you go.
You go in age before beauty. I got
Yeah,
you.
that's
Okay.
it. So
Yes.
we have Rich Reda with us.
Okay.
He's an insurance and specialist.
Excellent.
Okay.
Okay.
And we have Lori Wolf with us too.
And what does Lori
She's
do?
an attorney, a special needs attorney. So that's what we're going to be talking about today.
That's excellent.
Special needs planning. So what do you think?
I think it's going to be a great topic.
All right.
There's not enough of this out there.
No, there isn't. I think it's often overlooked.
I agree.
There's a lot of practitioners and advisors like us that shy away from it.
Because they don't
Because
understand
they
it.
don't understand it. And it's not, it's, unlike myself, who I live it day to day because of, as you know, I have a 26-year-old who's, I guess she's like a 2-year-old, if I'm lucky.
Mhm.
But she's a sweetheart. She's an angel. And as we all know, well, some do know this, most people perhaps know, it can run the gambit. You can have, where my case, my daughter, you have to take care of her. She's a baby. I have to change her, feed her, bathe her when she's with me. Whereas there's some kids that are high functioning and parents have to deal with that. Sometimes that could be more challenging or different challenges, I suppose. But it's interesting. I'll give a little background before we speak with Rich and Lori. When I worked at the bank in New York back in 98 to 2008, and Andrea was born in 1998, and I did planning then, and special needs was not really a topic that was discussed too much. But I began to realize, I was optimistic. Let's put it this way. I was optimistic that Andrea would get better. And then I was also going through a divorce, which is not uncommon in the special needs community, whereas the average traditional family, a little over 50%, probably hovering around 80% for those with special needs kids, because there's so much pressure. And, there's a little blame and what happened and, I don't know, blame, shame, whatever terms you want to apply. But I began to think, oh, gee, could this be something I could or should be doing? And it wasn't until after I left that I met people that began to push me in that direction. And actually, one of the people that did it was the gentleman here sitting across from me. He actually said to me when we met, it's probably 15 years ago, right? 2010. Yeah, because I was getting into it because I thought, gee, I should know more about insurance. And because that is actually one of the ways, we'll talk about this, but it's one of the leverageable assets that people need to apply when doing special needs planning. Because when we get into this conversation, I know Rich and Lori a long time, and invariably we'll meet people that say, I have a special needs trust. And they think they're done.
Yes.
But that's
I've
just
seen
one
that happen.
small piece of
Yeah.
the jigsaw puzzle.
Seen that happen too many times.
So, but anyway, that's kind of how I got into it. Is I'm living it day to day, and Richard asked me before we went on air, how's my other daughter? And I always say, I'm fortunate. I have a 26-year-old and a 25-year-old, and the 25-year-old has special needs of her own. Not that she chose them. She's just going through some health issues. But it's amazing that what happens, I think, in general, because a lot of people apply special needs on a wide spectrum.
Right.
So whether it's someone like my daughter who has, very low function and she's going to need care throughout the rest of her life, to those kids that are high functioning and anything in between. And we really address those needs. And unlike the traditional family whereby we do planning for them, you and I,
Right.
they could choose to leave a legacy for their kids and grandkids. If they want to spend all the money, they can do that too. And Rich and I always talk about that too. It's like, you can spend it all. What's the difference? But most parents that have a special needs kid, they don't have that luxury. They got to plan for 2 generations.
Yes, they do.
And then they also have to pick who's going to look after their son or daughter. That's a real problem. And it's a real issue that all of us have had this conversation with family members. It's not an easy one. And it's not one that they choose and own and stick with it for the rest of their life too, because that can change, because life's dynamic. Issues could arise within the family that changes things, or things could change with the kid as well. So there's a whole host of different things that could occur. So anyway, one of the things I wanted to do, other than give my background about how I got into it, was maybe we could ask them how they got into this field.
I think that's an excellent idea.
So we will start with. We'll start with you, Lori. How's that?
Great. That's great.
Always the bridesmaid.
So I got started in this pretty early in my practice. I've been practicing 30 years now. And when I joined my law firm, Cole Schatz, there was no one who knew anything about special needs planning. My mother was a special ed teacher. And when I was bat mitzvahed, my gift was a computer. I didn't know what to do with it. My mother, who was a special ed teacher, decided to use it to help children who were unable to communicate through technology. And she started teaching after teaching at school. She would come home and teach in the house. My job was always to hang out and play with the kids as they waited their turn. And I volunteered also at her school, and I developed a passion for working with children with special needs. And so when I joined the firm and when I was doing estate planning, it was something that was important to me that our firm could handle and could help families who have children with special needs, because they are planning not just for themselves, but for the next generation, as you mentioned, and it's important to get it right. What I found was a lot of solo practitioners handle special needs planning, but not a lot of the big firms. And what that meant, as I found, was there were some gaps in the planning where there were families with children with special needs. There was no tax planning built in. There were some issues that just weren't addressed. So I made it my business to become a specialist. And as it happens, I have family members at this point who have needs for special planning as life happens. But I started it for less personal and more passion reasons.
From the heart.
From the heart.
Yeah,
and it's something
yeah.
just that I love to do.
Yeah.
It's probably about 30%, 40% of my practice now.
Is it that high? Yeah.
It is. It is.
Well, that's good, because it's obvious when we interact that you have a passion for it.
I
And you
love
have to have a passion for doing what you do. I mean, people ask me all the time, so when are you going to retire? I say, retire from what? I love what I do. It's like, it's work, but it's not.
Well, that's what they say. If you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And I love what I do.
Yeah, for sure. It's
Well, we
great.
certainly appreciate you coming. And I never realized, or I'm just getting to know you, of course, but I always wondered how people got so involved with special needs, because it takes a special person to get involved. But it sounds to me like your mom was just an awesome person to teach you and to work with.
Absolutely.
So I
Very
get it
special
where
woman.
it comes from the heart. So that's awesome. How did you get involved?
Well, I got into the insurance business. Let's see, I'll be 33 years this month.
You started when you were 11.
Yeah, I was 10, but yeah, great. Early on when I started in the insurance business, I had clients on Long Island, and the wife was a special education teacher. And we were just doing a little bit of family planning for them, and came up in conversation, and she said, they do all these presentations at the school all the time, and no one ever does anything on, anything about special needs. And, we got into a conversation about the PTA and then what they're providing. And so we started talking a little bit more next time I met with them, and one thing led to another. And then before I know it, she was referring me to a couple of families that had, just in what they thought was regular insurance needs, but they all had a special needs child, which got me then, I consider myself pretty good with insurance, but it's a different animal when you're dealing with, might be estate planning or intricate business planning like you're familiar with. And then special needs planning is a whole different animal. And I realized, you know what? I need to get myself a little bit closer to some attorneys who actually do this. And over the years, a couple here and there, but then when the three of us sort of hooked up, I realized, every time, me, every time we do these presentations, I'm always like, I have no problem sitting in the back and waiting, we'll do an hour and a half and I get my 3 minutes and I'm cool with it.
And he's the funny one. That's what they enjoy.
The information that comes out of what Lori does specifically is unbelievable. And then I always consider myself like, she goes in and, checks out the wound, makes a diagnosis, treats it, whatever thing. And then at the very end, like I'm the guy, they put the little Band-Aid on at the end. And I'm like, okay, we'll do the Band-Aid. But
you give the lollipop too,
right? Sometimes the lollipop.
Entertainment.
But it blew my mind how unaddressed the special needs planning was in the life insurance business. And it's just, I think, doing this for a long time, what you start to realize is most people consider the best cost savings measure to be procrastination. And it couldn't be any more opposite, right?
The worst, yes.
But you brought up a great point. People are overwhelmed, a lot of stress on their marriage, a lot of, if you have 3 kids and one is a special needs child and the other 2 are running around in 5 sports, karate, dance, and whatever.
Yeah. How about family? How about parents that might have 1, 2, or 3 kids with special needs?
Yeah.
Right.
And there are some that are out there too. Right. I don't know if you've encountered them, Lori.
I certainly have.
So
yeah.
And you bring up a point that becomes overlooked a lot of times, which is people do get divorced, and then whether they then they say, I got a great idea, I'm going to get married again, right? And then they do it again, and that doesn't make the situation in the first family go away. You still have a special needs child. You still have other kids. Maybe you now have more, and
more complications.
The discussion, and like we always say, you don't have to do something all the time, but you should have the discussion. Like, why wouldn't you want to know what's available and what the options are and everything? Because I think people have a false. I think they think everything costs a fortune, and a lot of times they're pleasantly surprised by, wow, if I'd have known it would only take this much to take care of this, I'd have done it years ago.
Why do we procrastinate, I guess, is the bigger question. And it's usually because they don't know what they don't know, as you're pointing out. If we are able to get in front of people and let them know that it is overwhelming, but we're also going to be your advocate. I mean, that's how the 3 of us sort of got together. And how long are we doing these presentations? That'd be 10
to 12 years,
right?
probably.
Yeah.
But I see this too, because, you ask why is there procrastination? It's not always conscious. Day to day, just getting through the day, from waking up, getting your child up, getting them through the day, getting yourself through the day, other family members through the day, work responsibilities. It's not necessarily a conscious choice to put it off. It's just that life happens and time goes by. And I see all the time that people come in and they put together a estate plan and they put together a special needs trust. If they haven't funded it, they really haven't done the job of taking care of their child. So really, first they have to take the steps to get the plan in place, but they have to make it work. The investments have to
Right.
be tied in. They have to have the right allocation to the trust. They have to have the insurance funding, because usually that's the biggest source of funding the special needs trust. And
Right.
it kind of frees up the parents to spend and live their lives if they know that something's dedicated to that trust. But it's got to be part of the bigger picture. It's not any one of us.
And it's what I said earlier. Oftentimes we get that, well, I have a special needs trust. Well, that's wonderful. But how did you
check
fund it?
one
Yeah,
off, right.
and you have to commend them. We have
Yeah,
to
of course,
'cause a lot of
admire
people
them.
It's a
don't
step.
even have
Exactly.
that. Right.
So most people do not even have that. But those that do, now we need to help to get them to the next couple of steps, as Lori pointed out, is most of them don't.
Lori, I know this is your specialty, but
Mhm.
have you ran into people who said that they had set something up with special needs to review their documents for them? Because
Oh, yes. I don't
times,
charge to review people's documents, and I do it all the time. And oftentimes it's not what they think they have.
That's what I've ran into. Not that I've worked with you guys yet, but I've seen where clients have gone to meet with somebody and the documents not be
No, they're
drafted
not.
correctly.
The supplemental benefits trust, which is really the special needs trust, you'd be amazed. I'm not an attorney, but I could read it and go, this isn't right. Lori, what do you think? No, it's wrong. So
Yeah, we see it all the
well,
time.
yeah, sadly.
Stuff gets dated too, though.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it's not operator error. Sometimes it's just, it's like having a will when your child is, your kids are 2 and 4, and now your kids are, 28 and 30, and maybe they don't need, all the same things and the restrictions that are inside that will and everything. And, people do feel a lot of times, no, I already did that. And you're like, when did you do that? And they're like, well, let's see, the Berlin Wall was still up. And you're like, I'm pretty sure you need to you got to go back and you got to do this over. But like you said, if you're busy being busy.
Well, that brings up another question then. How often should
just
a
gonna say that.
document be reviewed?
Every 3 years is the rule of thumb, at least my rule of thumb. So
3 to 5 at least.
Okay, at least,
but
right,
yeah,
okay. We
right.
could, if it gets to 5, it's all right, but you don't want to put it in the drawer, forget about it, think you're in good shape.
Or
There are
there's
so many
there's
things.
legislative changes.
There could be
too.
legislative change. There can be regulatory changes. There can be policy changes
Life
that aren't.
changes.
There could be the people you appointed have died
Died, yeah,
or have
exactly.
things going on in their lives where they're no longer the right people, or your relationship with them changed.
Mhm.
Your kids' needs changed. So
The kids
3 to
get
5 years.
older,
Yes, every 3 to
they
5
age in
years.
majority, etc. So there's a
Yeah.
lot. There's a lot
I
of
think
factors.
sometimes people are afraid. They're like, well, I already did it, and I'm afraid if you review it, something's going to come up.
and then it'll cost me time and money.
But
Yep.
it's better to come up at that time on a review, right?
Mhm.
And I think the thing that we do best when we do our presentations together is that I feel like we make it very user-friendly. Look, you bring your legal documents, you bring your investment statements, you bring your insurance stuff. We're going to review it for you for this much, right?
Mhm.
You can't get other than me going to someone's house and giving them money to look at their insurance, we can't give them a better deal, right? And you still get people who go, I'm going to do it, right? But how many times do we talk 2 years later and you go, do you remember the Joneses? They finally called me back, and
Oh,
we
yeah.
did a presentation and met them 2 years ago.
That happens more often than not.
100%. That's why the 3 to 5, you start at 3 and you get them by the 5th year.
I've got the best story though. I had one of our presentations. I had a folder in the back of the car that was in the back of the car for I don't know how long in the back seat. I went through a car wash. The person there got the folder and called me as a child with special needs. That's a crazy. But I've had people 2 years, 3 years later, they find the folder with our information and they reach out and say, this has been on my desk for a long time. I know I need to take care of it. As long as they get it done.
That's very true. As long as they get it done. By the way, going back to what Jim mentioned before, we were talking about how there's documents that don't match up, that shouldn't be done.
Yeah.
not that I want to denigrate the legal community, but is it true that a lot of attorneys may not want to say they can't do something even though that's not their specialty, so they do it anyway?
Well, there's some generalists is the way I would
Yes,
describe it.
okay.
I would hope there aren't so many attorneys that practice. It's like going to a cardiologist when you have a problem with your lungs. They may have some general information that's helpful, but you really want a specialist. With special needs, you want a specialist. There are some generalists that think they can figure it out if they go online and find some forms. That's not going to help anybody at the end of the day. It really is a special field, special issues that need to be considered. So
the guy who did the closing on your house should not be doing your special needs.
needs.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
yet I find a lot of people do that. So, a lot of the times when, Jim, you mentioned, do you find people who think they have documents that are in place? A lot of times that's what we're dealing with.
How do you address that, though, when you get a document that was written for somebody without hurting their feelings?
Well, the good news is I'm not talking to that attorney,
Yes.
right? So I'm talking to the client, and they may tell me, oh, I just got this done a year ago. So they're not happy with the idea that they may need to redo everything. But it's just a gentle explanation that this isn't going to get the job done for your child, that your goal is to make sure you preserve eligibility for government benefits. And here are the issues with the documents you have. So it's really showing them the errors, the things that are not being addressed. And when we can, we'll just amend the documents, but sometimes it just requires all new documents.
It's as one of the gentlemen that I worked with 30 years ago, he would always tell clients, a will is a perfect document, or any other document is perfect until the person passes away. Then you find out all the problems.
Right? That's when you worry.
And that's not unlike the same thing. They don't know what they don't know.
And it's not just having the documents. It's changing the beneficiary of retirement plans and annuities and life insurance. It's tying it all together. So that, it is at death where you find out what people forgot to take care of. Those, they forgot they had an old IRA that they didn't coordinate the beneficiary of, or that old policy. That's when the test is, and you want to make sure you have trusted the documents before that time.
That's where the planning comes in, and that's where we coordinate with one another, all three of us, to make sure that nothing's overlooked. I can't say that it's foolproof, but I'm probably pretty close, because we will have addressed all these various little loose ends that they have. And it's also another thing too is everybody has a plan. They may not know what they have. It might be fragmented. We're helping to coordinate it and bring it together and bring it to life, so that it's addressing everything that should be in place.
I'll tell you this also, having a plan that you're getting from an attorney that's a special needs plan doesn't mean it's specific to your child either, right? So you're talking about your child who's at the age level mentally of a 2-year-old. You may have another child with special needs who has the ability to work, but not full time. You may have individuals with mental health struggles, with addiction struggles, with, there's a spectrum. There's a very broad spectrum of needs. And the thing I would tell you is it's so important, not just to meet with somebody who does special needs, but to be very specific about what your child's special needs are and what they're not, and how you can help your child succeed and protect your child through the plan, but also let them fly to the extent that they can handle things on their own. So, and that's also where, Rich's good point of wanting to look at these every few years comes into play, because your child's capabilities change. And you want to make sure the documents change with the child's needs.
I also think one of the things we see more and more, which you wouldn't expect, is some people do a really good job on the special needs side of it. Mm-hmm. And then you go to them, well, you have 4 children, right? One of them has special needs. And they've done the special needs trust, and they've earmarked certain assets for that, and they've looked into all government benefits and everything, and they have such a deficiency on the other side of their traditional family planning, and because they think they're mutually exclusive. You can tie all this stuff together, and it doesn't have to be overbearing and, oh my God, I got to meet with other people and I got to do all this. And that's why I think it makes sense to when you meet with the attorney and you lay it all out there. Like, I know when Lori talks to people, if they have 4 kids and one special needs, she addresses both sides, right? And or if they have an ex-spouse, or if they have certain other needs and stuff. And we see that more and more now, where sometimes they're a little better buttoned up on the special needs side, although not entirely. And the planning is horrific on the other side. And you're
to that point, I don't mean to interrupt you, Lori, but to that point, it's not equal planning. It's equal, right, but it's not equal, because and that has to be defined within the family, how we will work that out.
And that's what the other thing I was going to say. You have to be very sensitive about that point, because oftentimes what I find is where where parents have a child with special needs and neurotypical child or children, the children without the neurotypical kids may have some resentment that the child with special needs got more attention. See, attention equal love. They felt that they were not neglected isn't the word, but they didn't get the same time. And so where you have those situations, you have to be especially considerate in terms of dividing up the assets at the end of the day, because money can send another message when you're directing more of it to a child. And in some cases, the neurotypical children understand and are speaking with the attorneys as well, saying, no, give more to my sibling. And in other cases, there's that resentment that has to be factored in, because as a parent, you don't want to leave a child resenting their sibling, when the goal is typically to have your neurotypical children there to support your child with special needs in the long run.
Because neither parent is going to be there. So
forever.
You want the family, especially their siblings,
to be there.
So we have to be very sensitive.
So what we can do for that is maybe you have an insurance policy or something on the side that adds to the trust for the child with special needs, but the will says leave everything equally. So it's the appearance.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that the siblings a lot of times don't want that burden?
I've seen it both ways. So I've seen it where the siblings are eager to step in and very supportive and protective of their sibling. And I've seen it where they really don't want to have that responsibility. They feel it's a burden. I'm quick to tell parents not to place that responsibility on a neurotypical child while they're young. They need to get their feet under them. They need to finish college before they're involved. They need to finish grad school if they're going. They need to get a job and finish their lives, put their lives together. It's too much responsibility when they're young, even if they're clamoring for it. If at all possible, rely on other people until the siblings are older. And then when they're older, you have to take not only their temperature, the temperature of the siblings, but also see who they've married, who's in their life. Because I've seen a number of cases.
Why does that matter, Lori?
I've seen a number of cases where the sibling spouses are resentful.
Okay. I can understand that. Then that brings me to the next question. Well, actually, it's not even a question. It just leads to the thought of why you review these every 3 to 5 years.
That's why. Certainly one of the factors. It's multifactored.
Of course. Yeah. Change is always happening, and you have to stay on top of it.
But to Lori's point, coming from a place of experience, I'm fortunate. My daughter, Michaela, adores her sister, Andrea. But that is not always the case. And we've encountered it where some kids, they just check out. And it's not uncommon that, I don't want to say that it's a male or a female thing, but oftentimes, sometimes the boys don't necessarily want to do that if they have a sister or even a brother. But then there's other times, like you said, Lori, they have no problem with it. They're eager to do it. Yeah. They want to do it.
I think they also, part of the biggest hurdle in any planning, specifically for special needs planning, when you're dealing with family, you don't know what you don't know. right? And what you definitely don't know is, well, where's my 25-year-old neurotypical child winding up in 5, 6, 7, 10 years? Will they be married? Are they going to have this career? Are they going to have this, right? So I think that the best thing that we do for people is try to mitigate as much of this unknown as possible, whether it's through documents or allocations and proper funding or insurance protection and things like that, because you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? When your daughter or your son becomes 35 and 40, well, if you hung your hat on them being passing the baton to them, and now they go, well, I'm married and I have kids, or my job requires me to do this, or I have to do that. Now what do you do?
I sometimes build in the flexibility for a sibling to be able to elect to become a co-trustee or sole trustee once they've reached a certain age. Usually it's around age 35, because you want that neurotypical sibling to have financial savvy, be more settled in their lives before you even think about involving them. But so sometimes where it's unclear whether the sibling's going to want to be involved, we make it a choice, but we have other people that we're depending on in the interim. The other thing in this regard that I see come up is sometimes families come and say, I don't need a special needs trust. I'm going to leave everything to my neurotypical children, and they're going to take care of my child with special needs.
That gets a double thumbs up, right?
Yeah, sure. We're thrilled to hear that.
My work is done here, and you just leave.
Exactly.
Now they get married.
And
then they get a divorce.
Or they get in a car accident and they're creditor issues.
Right, exactly.
The best of intentions may end up with the worst of results. So never the right answer.
That wouldn't be the right answer even if they were a traditional family.
It wouldn't.
No. So,
what if that child dies? The assets end up with somebody else. Yeah. How is that child with special good needs going to be cared for? So,
yeah, it's you always think, it's funny, every time we do one of our seminars, as I'm driving there, I always say, well, we've pretty much seen it all, right? And
no.
But then you'll hear somebody, whether it's in person or on the Zoom or something like that, and they start laying out their situation, and you go, wow.
That's new.
This is new, right? But not uncommon, right? Just maybe new to us. So you realize, you know what? As much as we do and what we're able to do, there's a lot. There's a lot of information to get out there to help people out, and I think that's the best thing we do. I always tell people, I don't care. And I've said this for over 30 years. I don't care if you get your insurance from me. Get it from somebody. Here's what you need. I don't care if your third cousin is forcing you to buy their insurance. Get it. Congratulations. I'll help you write it.
Put it in place.
But do it. Don't not do it.
How do you typically set up your insurance contracts so that it benefits? And I know this is a loaded question because there's so many different aspects when it comes to special needs planning as well as estate planning. But how do you structure your insurance to make sure that it's doing the job that the documents stipulate?
Well, and that is the question, right? And we've had this conversation. Yeah. So, I've always tried my best to take a complicated topic, which life insurance can be a complicated topic for people. That's why a lot of people don't do it, right? And try to just make it really vanilla and eliminate as many moving parts as possible, right? And I always tell people the first thing to do is fill the need, right? So if you have neurotypical children and special needs children, and you know that everything in your world, after talking to your attorney, they say it's $1.5 million of need, right? First thing we do while we're going to have this major discussion is underwrite that person. Throw an application in for $1.5 million. And while that's happening, talk to the lawyer, talk to the investment advisor. And now we start saying, okay, how are we going to position this $1.5 million? Because I think, Jim, what a lot of people don't understand, and I know you've been in the business a long time, so they don't understand that insurance can be multiple policies, different types of policies, perhaps with different carriers. Whether it's 3 different kinds of term insurance. It could be, whole life, universal life, term, and stuff like that. So what we try to do is make it very easy for them and just say, listen, let's get you underwritten for X, and we'll shake it out after we talk to the attorney and the investment advisor where it's going to go. And I think that's really the best way to do it.
When you and I know we've done this before, I don't necessarily want to look at insurance as an investment, but when it comes to what you just described, you can create a portfolio just as you would an investment portfolio.
You can, and right. I think insurance fills a really big need in somebody's overall portfolio. I won't call it an investment because I think it's a little disingenuous because not that it doesn't perform, but when people think of an investment, like I joke with you all the time, right? No one ever gets into a crowded elevator and goes, I bought life insurance, right? But if they bought Facebook at $1, you'll never hear the end of that guy, right? Uh-huh. That being said, what the insurance can do for them is will blow their mind in the long run. But I think calling it an investment, I always look at it this way. I always think that what insurance is a lot of times is, no matter what kind of meal you're making and you're doing all those things, at the very end, when you get that salt and pepper shaker and you jazz it up a little bit, the life insurance is really that. And I also think one of the big things is it is a permission slip for people to do so many other things with their assets. Like you've never done retirement planning for somebody and they go, listen, let me just tell you this. The day I stop working, I would prefer not to spend any of my retirement money. I'd like to live like a cockroach so that I can leave this money to the family. No one ever says that. They want to travel. They want to go golfing. They want to go buy stuff, right? They want to do all these things. And having life insurance is that permission slip to go enjoy your money.
Because also leverages their money, right? Like it makes it, right?
You work so you can enjoy retirement, right?
I always looked at insurance as discounted dollars.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right. That's the leveraging.
Right.
But in this case with special needs planning, I would think you're selling recommending a lot more permanent product because it's not a short-term need, get through college for your child. It's a long-term need, take care of your child no matter what age you die at.
Look, in a perfect world, okay, in the utopian world of insurance, everybody buys these giant chunks of permanent insurance, okay? That being said, if no one's ever passed away owning term insurance and the insurance company sent the check to the house and then attached to that check was a note that said, what a loser, he only had term insurance. Right? They're going to pay that. They're going to give that $1 million or that couple of $1 million. So when money's tight, which, I never tell anyone how to spend their own money. You can suggest, you can show them, you can lay it out there. Like discounted dollars is a great example of doing that. But at the end of it, when some people were just programmed that, they don't believe maybe in permanent insurance and stuff like that, you try to tell them you're trying to solve a permanent problem with a temporary solution. Maybe they don't agree. But if you leave there and the worst thing they do is buy some term insurance, you still got to feel a lot better than them buying nothing.
Especially if it's convertible, so that they can make a different decision down the road if it makes sense.
And true story, yesterday I got a phone call from somebody who bought 10-year term insurance. And when we met, this is a true story, they had a 15-year problem but only wanted to buy 10-year insurance. And I said, listen, I'm pretty good at math. 10's less than 15, but okay, we could do this.
Right.
And he wouldn't budge, took the 10. Well, that policy is expiring. Then what people don't realize is the insurance company will let you keep the 10-year term, but buckle up because the premium in year 11 is going to be 17 times what it was, right? So now I want to get some new insurance. And I said, for your 4-year need, right? But what are you going to do? Are you as healthy as you were 10 years ago? No. Maybe you're not, right? Are you this? Are you that? So you try to save a couple of bucks 10 years ago, and guess what? It comes back to bite you, right? A little bit. So that's our job. Our job is to make it not as painful. Right? Everyone thinks, it's just you're just trying to make money on me. Look, I've done more pro bono insurance work in my day than most people. And you know what? it is what it is. I never force anybody to buy anything.
No, you shouldn't. That's
Right.
one of the reasons why I like working with you and having introducing you to clients and prospects alike is because you're going to be honest and transparent with them and explain to them. And one of the things that I think separates us too, and I do know you have said this to me a number of times, you don't view yourself only as an insurance person. You view yourself as a planner. I'm a planner too.
Sure.
So
As am I.
yeah. And effectively, that's what we really are, is helping people, and we're helping them to plan
You're also,
their
think about
needs today and then beyond.
You're a dad, right? You're a family guy. You're a family person, like, people think like, okay, here comes the insurance person or the financial person or the attorney. Guess what? We go home at the end of the day, you pull in the driveway, there's a family in there, right? You got your kids, you got your relatives, you got all this stuff. You're not without empathy for other people's situation, and you try to convey that as best you can. I mean, listen, we all know people who shouldn't be in the business, who do things in a way where you go, wow, that person sleeps at night? That's shocking.
And then they do well on top of it.
Well, they might do well, but at some point, things always come back. But that's not what we do, right?
No.
We because I could tell you right now, I don't know a lot of people. I know when we do those presentations, the first thing we tell people is, listen, we'll look at everything in your world. We'll give you
and we
what
give
people
them
don't realize is
time.
I love telling people the thumbs up. Like if they say to me, well, I bought this insurance 10 years ago, and I go, this is a great policy. Do not get rid of it. Right. And they're looking at me and I'm like, no, it's okay that you made a good purchase. Like I'd love giving you a thumbs up. Now you got to feel a little bit better. Right. And maybe we'll say, look, you need a little bit, that coverage, maybe, that's 10 years ago money. Maybe you need a little bit, maybe we piggyback something on top of that.
I want to make a point to both of you. We kind of touched on it earlier, the differences between traditional financial planning and special needs planning. And you kind of alluded to it before. When it comes to traditional family planning, I'd say 75, 80% is standard. And there's slight differences with each individual case, hence the term personal financial planning, right? There's certain nuances, certain differences, but you pointed out that many times we meet people and it's an eye-opener, it's an unusual case. More often than not, I'd say it might be reversed almost. 75% of the time, we really are introduced to unique situations within the special needs community. Would you both agree with that?
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah. And you know what? That keeps our job very interesting.
In many ways it does, yeah.
Keep us challenged.
From a planning perspective too, I don't mean to interrupt you, Jim, but from a planning perspective, that's also what I help to try to do is when we do it for the traditional family, you're doing long-range planning, but I also have to do long-range planning for the parents, but then I also have to do it for the child. And it goes back to the point that you made before is, and also you too, Lori, is how much insurance? Is it permanent? Is it term? Is it a combination of both? And as I have said to people too, is, you know what? I'm going to calculate it. You're not in the ballpark. I'm going to try to get you in the ballpark, maybe in the outfield, because it's hard to determine those numbers because they don't have it, even in a sense, if the kid is 10 or 12 years old, they don't have a good idea of how long they're going to live, what kind of medical issues they are. My daughter has asked me several times, so what about Andrea? How long will she live? I don't know. I'm going to assume a good long life, but maybe she won't because she's not ambulatory. She doesn't walk. She doesn't speak. So maybe later on in life, she's going to have issues. So that could be the case with other parents as well. So I have to plan accordingly is what I'm saying. And then when it comes to the insurance, we could start to peel back as the kid ages and the parents age as well. So there's a lot of different things that we can do and do, in fact, do.
So I've had a number of situations where parents are concerned they're putting too much in a special needs trust, that the child's needs
Interesting.
between government benefits and the fact that the child's needs are not maybe overly expensive. Their life is pretty well covered by a lot of the benefits. And they tell me they don't want to lock up too much in a special needs trust that may not be available for their other children until the special needs child dies, hopefully long into the future. So I've had people come at it with that focus in mind, which isn't your typical, but it definitely is relevant in some cases where you're dealing with someone who has a high net worth. And in that case, first of all, I'll sometimes have to talk people out of capping the amount going to the special needs trust too low. Relying on government benefits can be tricky. You can see how from administration to administration,
Especially if it changes.
the amount of benefits available could change. So that's one thing. Your child's medical needs could change. And the value of the dollar is definitely going to change. So oftentimes in those situations, I'm actually the one encouraging family to put more into the special needs trust. And then sometimes it's with a cap, no more than X dollars, with the rest going to trust for the neurotypical kids. Or sometimes I have a blended trust where here's the amount that's just going to a special needs trust. And then I have this greater amount that goes into a trust that's for a special needs trust as to that child, but also for the benefit of the other children and can be used for multiple purposes. So.
Well, you stole my next question. So that's
that?
good.
Sorry.
Because it's great because that's comes up in the planning. There's parents that they may have both a first party and a third party trust. So maybe we should address that as well as the point that you just made about setting aside more funds in another trust to offset the concern that, the other siblings may have that they're not getting equal amounts of distribution from the parents.
And what happens to the trust if something happens to that special needs child?
Well, the assets pass according to the terms of the trust, and it partly depends on what kind of trust that is. So let's go back to what James was saying, that there are two kinds of special needs trusts. There's a first-party trust and a third-party trust. A first-party trust is created with a child's own money. So for example, grandma leaves money to your child with special needs. Oops. I didn't know grandma was going to do that. And it went into the child's own name. Now what do? It's going to make the child ineligible for government benefits if the child has more than $2,000 of assets. That money can either be spent down on the child's care. Some of it could go to an ABLE Act account, which is like a 529 plan, but for special needs. Or it can go to a first-party special needs trust. And oftentimes, if there's a large amount in the child's name, that's where it's going. And a parent or a grandparent or a guardian, or even the special needs child themselves, if they're competent, can create that trust. But that trust is solely for the benefit of the child with special needs. And the government only allows that and creates eligibility for government benefits for that child if there's some real set restrictions on how those funds are used. No one can, no one can have a tangential benefit from that trust but the child with special needs. The assets in that trust have to revert back to the state to reimburse the state for government benefits paid when the child dies. And under New Jersey law, there has to be an accounting filed with the state each year showing how those funds are used and invested. And if there's an expense of $5,000 or more under New Jersey rules, you have to get 45 days advance written notice to the state. So they have a chance to contest the expense. So that's when it's the child's own money. So when you ask me what happens at a child's death, if it's the child's own money, the state's going to get potentially some or all of those funds. Whatever's left goes to the beneficiary's heirs at law, typically, whoever the closest beneficiaries are. On the other hand, if it's third-party money, grandma's giving the money directly to the special needs trust. Parents are putting money in a special needs trust for the child. It wasn't the child's money to start with. That's a third-party trust, and that's got a lot more flexibility. Those assets are also to be used for the benefit of the child, but there can be tangential benefits for other people. So, for example, companion costs can be given to allow the child to travel with the benefit of an aide. And that aide could enjoy some of that vacation, and that's okay. It can be used for computers. It can be used for after-school programming. It can be used for companions to come into the home. There's lots of availability for the use of those funds. And when the child dies, what's left in that trust goes to the beneficiaries that the person who set up the trust named. So if I'm setting up a trust for my child, and it's a special needs trust for my child, the assets can be used basically for the care of the child. Ideally not for housing and food expenses that can affect some of the Social Security benefits otherwise available to the child, but for anything else it can be used. When my child dies, it goes to my other kids. State gets nothing. I don't have to file an accounting for the state. I don't have to give 45 days advance written notice on how those funds are used. It's much more flexible trust. So you can see how every day of the week, you'd rather have a third-party trust than a first-party trust. And the goal is to try and avoid having monies end up in the hands of the child with special needs that need to be addressed through a first-party trust. Sometimes it's unavoidable,
Ideally,
a litigation.
Exactly. I was just going to say that. So ideally, we would rather have the third-party trust, but in some situations, parents do wind up with their kid having a first-party trust, and then we kind of have to work around that too. And there are things that we can, in fact, do there, right? So...
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Jim, you have any?
Actually, you guys have been doing a great job. Going back to the life insurance, I guess, this aspect of it, when you're sitting, and I guess what's happening is I'm relating to from the business side of things, because that's my specialty is working with business owners. And like I have a situation going on right now where the owner's getting ready to retire. He's doing some estate planning. He has 2 sons. One's in the business, one's not. And the biggest problem that we're having right now is how to make it fair for both.
Talk to Rich.
Well, I get that. And in his case, though, he's unhealthy. There is nothing that we can do for that. So we have to look at the estate differently. And the problem is the one son wants nothing to do with the business. The other son, he's heavy into the business. He's going to take it over. But it's not a fair setup because this son, if he does well, it's good. This son has a 9-to-5 job that he's happy with, but he won't get anywhere like this potential son could. And then the father's now trying to weigh out, well, how much do I leave this son and how much do I leave this son? And if I'm leaving him the business, then and I give everything over here, well, that's not going to be fair either.
So you have to think rough justice in that case.
Right.
Right? It's rough justice. It's not equality. So you have to think about, if I give a business to one son, he's got to work it. Or she's got to work it
exactly
to continue its value.
So versus this is where now I'm coming to.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with the situation of a special needs child and you're doing estate planning, I'm assuming it's the same issue that you're having here where a portion of the insurance has to be used for the special needs, but yet you still need to create enough of a estate so that your other children don't get upset. How do you?
It's a balancing act.
It's and I think that's one of the first things. That's one of the first conversations when you're going to assess, the needs, is basically, okay, in a perfect world, I always ask them, in a perfect world, what would your plan be for? Forget how much you have and forget the law for a minute. How would you like all of this to shake out to the kids? Right. And they'll say, well, in a perfect world, boom, 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 everybody gets their fair share. Okay. Now let's talk reality. And they'll say, well, unfortunately, you could do this. And believe it or not, there's usually, obviously, when you have a situation where somebody's uninsurable like that, it creates a little bit of some hurdles. But usually you can start laying it out there and you can get pretty close to an equitable distribution of overall assets, right?
Mhm.
By using insurance strategies and things like that. And I think when you water it down and you take away the legality and any documents and all that stuff, and you just talk dollars and cents and how they like it to shake out, and you start from there, and you kind of reverse engineer your way back into the plan,
Yeah.
it gives them a little bit of a comfort level, because people are. What's the number one reason people don't do stuff with us? They're intimidated by the process. They're not intimidated by us. They're intimidated by,
exactly.
oh my God, what's the
they
law?
could be
What's
of you,
this? What's
James.
that?
Oh, yeah.
Well, James is imposing, a little imposing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we don't. We
Got the
bring
pocket
him.
nap.
I'm
like
sorry,
the
I didn't mean to
pocket
get us off track.
Yes, I'm very imposing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to a question that I had for Lori.
Mhm.
Inter vivos versus testamentary trusts.
Okay.
Because I get this question often with some people. They don't really know the difference. They think they know the difference. Sometimes they get it right. Sometimes they don't. But maybe you can shed some light on that.
Okay. So a testamentary trust is a trust created under a will. Okay. So that's a trust that springs into existence only at death. A lifetime trust or inter vivos trust is created during life. So both of them can be special needs trusts, but they have different purposes. So if I know that my mom is going to leave money to my child with special needs, and I don't want it to go to that child directly, I want it to go to a special needs trust, having her leave it to the trust under my will may not help if she dies before me. That's not a trust that's in existence. It can't accept assets at that point. So I would want to set up a trust now to which other people can make gifts and bequests during life. They can fund it right away. And it can be set up so it's revocable until it's funded, which means that, look, if it's going to be another 30 years till my mom dies, hopefully, I have time to change it. I don't have to set up a new trust each time I want to change the trustees. And I create flexibility to change trustees anyway. But if life changes, I have flexibility to change it up until the date it's funded. And then it's only irrevocable as to what's in that trust. So, creating a trust during life can create a lot more flexibility in the use in the trust.
Yeah. I think the other question I often get is, which one is better? And I don't
Just
think
depends on
it
the
depends.
needs of the
Right.
family. One thing that reminded me of with flexibility, I want to mention, I get people, I don't know if you guys see it all the time, that say, I don't know if my child is going to be eligible for government benefits because they're high functioning. And they're 6 years old.
And we just had a meeting on this too,
Yeah,
right?
they're 6 years old. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if they're going to need eligibility, if they'll be able to work on a full-time basis and live independently. So when we talk flexibility about inter vivos or testamentary trusts, we also have to think flexibility in terms of the structure of the trust. So I tell people, you hope for the best and you plan for the worst. So you have a trust that protects for eligibility for government benefits, even though you're hoping they don't need it. And that can look different ways. It can look like a regular trust that would be applicable should the child be working, but be convertible to a special needs trust should the child otherwise be eligible for government benefits. Or you can flip that on its head and be a special needs trust that if the child doesn't have eligibility for government benefits, it's just a lifetime trust for the care of the child. So flexibility in how the trust is structured, flexibility in when it's existing, when it's ready for funding, all those things have to be considered when you're setting up a trust.
Right. Very good. That's important because I get these questions all the
Yeah.
time with people is, I have the trust and I don't know which one is better. And it really depends. But it's also good that they have it.
Yeah.
You know
as
what,
well.
too, James? I think for people with neurotypical children, that they dramatically underestimate the use of some of these trusts, because if I had $1 for every time I've gone in to see somebody and they go, oh, so you have some insurance already? Who are the beneficiaries? Well, the twins. Well, how old are the twins? They're 4. Oh, sure. Because a lot of times you'll see an insurance company hand a $500,000 check to a pair of 4-year-olds
Yeah.
and tell them to have at it and go spend your money wisely
Right.
and do whatever. Some of these tools are used for all parts of family planning, not just special needs planning. And, some of these trusts are, they give you a little bit. I always tell people it helps you sort of have a little bit of financial authority maybe from the grave, if you will, to stay with your kids and help them out a little bit, and also protect them from what you said before: bad marriage, bad divorce, car accident, or some sort of lawsuit where there are kids. We've set trusts up back in the day for neurotypical families where the kid bought their house inside the trust.
Yeah.
And
that's a good thing. It's protected from respect.
They didn't have a compromised lifestyle at all. Insurance funded it. They had the assets in there. They didn't have to worry if the marriage didn't work out or if they got into a car accident and got sued. The property's in there now. So there are really, there's a lot of benefits that people aren't aware of.
Yeah. So we're going to summarize because we only have a few more minutes.
Right.
So I want to ask each of you a question. So Rich, if we do planning, we meet people or clients, prospects, either one. What are the top two things that you would want to be able to address with those individuals?
If we met new clients?
Yeah, if we never.
First thing I would want to address is any and all current protection planning they've done. And why I say any and all protection planning is because I always check, if insurance was free, how much would you have? And everyone goes, a bazillion, right? Give me whatever I need. So it's not the fact that they don't like the insurance as much as they don't like to pay for the insurance, right? And a lot of times when you ask people to bring out all their other protection stuff, sometimes you see them hemorrhaging money on something that's completely useless, or maybe it's an overlap, and we might be able to direct some money to something of a better use, right?
One thing that you had always recommended too is look at P&C, property and casualty insurance.
They talk about leaking money, sure.
And then we could find a lot of savings.
Right.
there.
And the second thing I would tell them is, anything, if it's not the protection documents, I always ask them, do you have a will? Do you have a trust? Right. And the last thing I'll say is this: a guy taught me a long time ago, over 25 years ago. He said, you want to be good at this business, he said, every appointment you go on, try to ask 3 questions that you don't think anyone else is going to ask. And I thought about that, and it wasn't that I'm smarter. It's not about asking a smarter question, but to give you, for instance, you're meeting with a couple, right? And the percentage of people that do get divorced, right, is pretty high. So I used to go, most people in the insurance business go in and go, okay, how old are you? How many kids you got? Blah, 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 blah. What do you do for a living? How much do you make, right? It's as vanilla as can be, right? Name, rank, serial number. That was it. I started asking questions. So any kids outside the marriage, right? Now, you'd be surprised. The first time I asked it, I saw them look at each other and I go, oh, this is working. And then I started asking questions if I met with somebody who owned a business. What's your thoughts about an inequitable distribution, because then kids aren't all thing. So what I'm trying to say is, by asking a couple of questions that you feel are going to look, our job is to make people a little uncomfortable, but leave them comfortable,
exactly.
Right? But if you don't make them a little uncomfortable when you're having the conversation, you're never going to get all the information you need. Now, I don't leave them in a state of, what the hell just happened? They want to kill you. We leave them comfortable, but you got to at least ask those questions. And I think that's what's important.
We're also trying to lead them to the point of taking action.
Right. And being comfortable, there's seldom any actions taken if you feel like everything's hunky-dory, right? So
Lori, your 2 points that you would want to summarize with.
So first is making sure that they have this special needs trust that's going to protect eligibility for government benefits and the assets are tied with it. And second is focusing on the trustee of that trust. Too often, they put in place a special needs trust and there's no attention paid to who that trustee is. It could be somebody who's now in their 80s, who's not going to be around to take care of the child for the child's life. It could be someone they haven't spoken to in 3 years. They may have somebody who's good with finances, but doesn't know their child. So they need to have somebody who both knows their child and is going to be supportive and sensitive to the needs of the child with special needs, as well as someone who's financially savvy and trustworthy.
Well, could they have co-trustees
And
too?
I was just going to say, it's hard.
Okay.
Sometimes some families have trouble finding someone that meets all those criteria. And so they can have a few people work together. And the key is, the trust is no better than the trustees managing it. So it's a good thing to focus on.
Jim, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I think you covered it quite well.
No, they did.
I know.
Well, we're just hoping you invite us back someday.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Well,
A lot of
that's
fun.
what we will do. I think in the near future, we have another podcast as a follow-up, and
Certainly.
we'll have Rich and Lori back.
I think that would be awesome.
Anytime.
Sounds fun.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Enlightened Wealth Strategies. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and inspiring.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow and subscribe to our podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform to stay updated on new episodes.
Your financial journey doesn't end here. Connect with us online for even more resources and exclusive content.
Until next time, remember, financial enlightenment is just an enlightened wealth strategy away. Investment advice is offered through Bell Point Asset Management, LLC, 500 Demont Ranch, Parkway Building 700, Unit 700, Reno, Nevada, 89521. Additional information about Bell Point Asset Management is available on the SEC's website at www.advisorinfo.sec.gov. It is important to read our disclosures available at this link, www.bellpointasset.com, disclosures. The information provided in this presentation is educational and limited to the dissemination of general information. This material is not intended to be a recommendation of any kind, investment, tax, or accounting advice. Does not constitute a solicitation to buy, sell, or hold a security or an investment strategy. Engage in any financial transaction and is not provided in a fiduciary capacity. The information provided does not take into account the specific objectives or circumstances of any particular investor or suggest any specific course of action. Investment decisions should be made based on investors' objectives and circumstances and in consultation with his or her financial professionals. While the advisor uses reasonable efforts to obtain information from sources believed to be reliable, the advisor makes no representation that the information or opinions contained in this material are accurate, reliable, or complete. All information and opinions contained in this material are subject to change without notice. The views and opinions expressed are for informational and educational purposes only as of the date of the production or writing and may change without notice at any time based on numerous factors such as market or other conditions, legal and regulatory developments, additional risks and uncertainties, and may not come to pass. This material may contain forward-looking information that is not purely historical in nature. Securities offered through Fortune Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA and SIPC, Bell Point Asset Management, LLC, and Fortune Financial Services, Inc. are not affiliated. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Investing involves risks. Principal losses possible.